All right, well, welcome back to another episode of Writer's Block. I am your host, Journal staff writer Sean Reider, as always. We have a great interview today with Nevada Beat institution, kind of. Chris Murray of Nevada Sportsnet. He's kind of kicking off our week-by-week summer podcast series where we're previewing every single team in the Mountain West, even if UNM doesn't play them. Really excited about this series. Got a lot of fun interviews lined up, and I'm really excited to share them with you guys. Before we get into Chris's great interview with us, giving us some plenty of insight on the Wolfpack, I did want to go through a couple things. It's I haven't done a podcast in a little bit really since the end of spring, and I did want to kind of run through some things that have happened since the end of spring, and that's really in regards to transfers. UNM really did not lose much of anybody of key significance to the transfer portal except for Key and Need. I don't remember if I recapped him in an episode or not, but he was basically UNM's de facto starting tight end. He is now transferring to BYU. I think he's already enrolled at BYU, I'm pretty sure. That was a shock to head coach Jason Eck. It was a shock to the rest of the staff. Jason Eck, you can go back and read our article, was a little bit blunt about it for sure in terms of talking about Need's decision to leave. But UNM at this point has added 10 transfers. They can continue adding people throughout the summer. I did catch up with offensive coordinator Luke Schleissner for a story that'll be dropping right around the time this podcast comes out. I kind of got a little more insight, at least on the offensive side of the ball, in terms of portal additions and the like. I will start off just because we mentioned Need. The tight ends, they're bringing in two guys, Simon Mappa from Cal, who just did this last spring at Cal. He was at a JUCO before that. And then tight end Marcus Vincent of Marcus Vinson, V-I-N-S-O-N, not Vincent. He's coming in from UTEP, played a lot at UTEP last year. The way that Schleissner kind of communicated this to me is that, or explained it to me in that sense, was that these are more, these are bigger and physical guys. They are more on the ball kind of tight ends, as you would imagine. Cade Keith and Dorian Thomas, they're more kind of move tight ends. They can split out, a little bit more versatility there in terms of catching the ball and all that. And Cade Keith is a guy that, honestly, I mean, if he bulks up, I mean, he's certainly got the frame to be more of an on-the-ball type of guy, but he's just not at that point yet. These guys, I mean, they bring the tight end room right now to 5 guys overall with Mappa, Vincent, Cade Keith, Aiden Valdez at a Campbell, and then Dorian Thomas. So it gives them, like, good depth there, too. I think they would like to probably add another just to kind of get to the ideal, maybe 6. Because they do run a lot of 12 personnel. You're going to be going through tight ends and all that as well. But yeah, I think tight ends certainly became a need. With Need leaving before the end of spring practice, that even kind of influenced the decision to not have a true spring game. It's just you only have 3 tight ends. You don't want to run those guys kind of ragged. So they did the offense-defense scrimmage in that sense. So I think they're in a good spot adding these guys in. You clearly needed to get those guys and bringing those in through the portal. That was pretty key. I will get now to, I think, the position that most fans were kind of looking for, quarterback. They're bringing in Cole Welliver from UConn, big kid. Played a little bit at UConn last year, decided to transfer after it was more of a, probably wasn't going to be able to play a ton this year at UConn as well. Gets a little bit closer to home. He's originally from Texas. Played for head coach Jason Witten at the prep level. So more of a pro-style offense, similar to what UNM is running. And that brings UNM to 5 quarterbacks in the roster, with Toa Fave coming in from De La Salle this fall. So that's Welliver, Jack Lane, James Lobstein, Gabriel Machenbacher, and then Fave. I think I got all 5 right there too. And they don't plan on adding any more. That is what Schleissner was pretty clear with me about. They're not really planning on it. They're set at this 5. So if you're holding out hope that they might add another veteran starter or something, that's just probably not in the cards. The 5 this is the 5 they're going to be rocking with in fall camp. They expect it to be a kind of a truly open competition between, Lane and Lobstein. Welliver told me when I interviewed him about a month back that he really wants to compete for the job too. So makes sense there, but I would not anticipate them adding another quarterback at this point. Kicker Grant Glasgow is the one special teams addition they got. They just needed more kickers. They just signed a kicker from the prep level out of Texas. I think they just won a 5A state title with him. And Glasgow is a guy they just needed more kickers. They only carried 1 kicker and 1 punter in terms of Luke Drizwicki and Charles Steinkamp throughout spring practice. They're always going to have to add more. So Glasgow to me makes sense with that. Two linebackers, or listed linebackers, I should say. Brett Carhu out of Memphis. He was the first portal addition. And then linebacker Kwame McCray out of Jack State. Carhu is a guy that was a former D2 All-American before he went to Memphis. He obviously has the connection there with, Spence Nowinski, who was the DC at Memphis before coming over to UNM and taking on the same role. And then McCray is a guy that has played a lot of football at Jack State in particular. Carhu also played a little bit of edge as well. And then McCray at certain points also kind of played safety. I'm not 100% sure how Carhu's going to really factor in terms of an on-field role, whether that he does end up being kind of like an outside linebacker. He does kind of end up being one of the two guys in the middle for UNM. But McCray, to me, with that kind of background that he has in terms of playing some safety, I might be interested to see if he does end up playing a little nickel star. That's something that it certainly seems like the kind of skill set that they might be getting him for. It seems like that could be in the cards. And I'll segue over to the defensive backs of that too. Caleb Coleman out of Texas State, CJ Johnson out of Auburn, and Chris Gant Jr. out of North Texas. Those are the three kind of true DB additions. More DB additions than I expected, but it seems like a kind of a smart move to really bring up the talent and the depth there. Caleb Coleman, I think, is a guy, it seems pretty clear to me that he will be playing star. He will be kind of in that room. Johnson, I know, will play boundary safety. And then Chris Gant Jr., I'm not entirely sure what he's going to be doing, but I think he's a guy that will probably end up in the safety mix somehow or some way. Again, was a little surprised they kind of targeted that area as much as they did, but got some more talent on the back end, in particular C.J. Johnson, a guy who was pretty highly recruited, ended up coming, out to Auburn and then decided to make a change. So I think that always plays. And then defensive lineman Jalen McIver. This one was this is a position that has surprised me so far this spring. Maybe we'll see what happens with Carhu and all that. But, the way I was looking at it, it seemed to me kind of the biggest need probably was just shoring up more of the defensive line. I'm not entirely sure how they're viewing it right now, to be honest with you. But it seemed like they definitely needed a couple more pieces in the interior defensive line. But McIver, to me, is a guy that at the very least could develop into that role. He's coming out of Jones College, junior JUCO in Mississippi. Played in 8 games last season. Not a ton of tape out there that I was able to find, but clearly a bit raw, but good size. And I would be curious to see if they're going to add any more to that room throughout the summer. I'll also add this too before we get into the interview with Chris, and you don't have to listen to me yap uninterrupted. Apparently, in talking to Schleissner, he said there isn't really a plan to add another receiver via the portal. I know that one of the Twitter accounts in like April or whatever put out there that Mark Hamper, who played under the staff at Idaho before transferring to Wisconsin, one of those Twitter accounts said, "Oh, he's definitely transferring into to UNM per reports," and that just did not happen. But right now, there are no plans to add any receivers through the portal this summer unless something crazy happens, something really kind of falls out of the sky. Schleissner did say that they looked at guys, they had people reach out to them, but they like what they have in the top line right now, and they like what they have in terms of their freshman receivers coming in too. I will have that article of Schleissner out by the time this interview drops, so you can find that on abqjournal.com. But beyond that, that is really all I have to share right now. I'm excited for you guys to kind of take in the first of our Mountain West season previews with Chris Murray, Nevada Sportsnet.
If you enjoy our podcast, please like and subscribe and consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal to help us bring you more content like this. You can find this episode and all of our podcasts on the Albuquerque Journal website, abqjournal.com, as well as YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. See the show notes for a discount code on a digital subscription. Thank you for supporting the Albuquerque Journal, New Mexico's leading news.
All right, today, very pleased to be joined by Chris Murray. Does a great job covering Nevada football, Nevada basketball, all Nevada sports, actually. For Nevada Sportsnet, his Monday mailbag is honestly one of my most consistently read, weekly articles. Chris, man, thanks for coming on today, bro.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. We'll talk a little bit of Nevada football. Kind of want to get into that. Nevada was 3-10 last year in Jeff Choate's first season. Showed a ton of pluck throughout the year. Season opener against SMU was really interesting, really fun. The Boise State game last year, Georgia Southern, Air Force, a lot of games, but just didn't close out a lot of those games. Just didn't have that one play, that one kind of stop come through. What is the mood around the program entering Choate's second season, which, you know, his first season came after some pretty lean years in the Ken Wilson era for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting. If you look at the history of Nevada football, generally a very proud program, mostly under those Chris Alt days. He's a college football Hall of Famer, was Nevada's coach for 28 years. Nevada went to 14 bowl games in a 17-year period before the last 3 seasons, during which they've gone 2-10, 2-10, and 3-10. So last year was Choate's first in that run. He came here with a lot of braggadocious, said that year one was not going to be a rebuild, it was going to be a launch. And the goal was to be the most improved team in the FBS in terms of win total. They went from 2 wins to 3 wins, so that number is not a huge improvement. But the team was much better on the field. You look at scoring differential, you look at the offensive productivity, you look at the defensive productivity, you look at the schedule they played, which is probably the hardest Nevada's ever had in its FBS history. That dates back to 1992. Nevada put a much better product on the field, but it didn't lead to wins. They were 2-6 in one-score games. They had some undisciplined play and some really silly penalties in a lot of games that probably cost them 3 or 4 wins. So I think people in the community, I mean, they're somewhat apathetic just because of how the last 3 seasons have gone. But those who have stuck with Nevada and actually watched the team last year, I think they are optimistic that Jeff Choate will get Nevada back to what it used to be, which is kind of a bowl team year in and year out. Can he get it to the championship level? There are a lot of obstacles to be able to get there from a financial and facility standpoint. But I think personally myself, Jeff Choate is the right guy to try and turn this program around. He is very blue collar. He is used to doing more with less if you look at his history. And I think this year should be at least a bowl caliber season when you look at the schedule. But the roster is still not in a very good spot. I mean, only 4 returning starters from a 10-loss team does not generally instill a lot of hope. But I think if you're a Wolfpack fan, this is probably going to be the best season you've got the last 4 or 5. Now, does that mean that you're competing for a Mountain West title? Probably not.
Choate is a guy, and you kind of touched on this. He's a guy that I've kind of really enjoyed watching from afar, maybe more than any other like non-New Mexico coach. I mean, every clip I see of him on Twitter, I'm like instantly clicking on it because he always says something. Mm-hmm. And that Choate boat picture, we'll put that up like in the podcast video because it's hilarious. How is he like? You mentioned blue collar. I mean, how is he taken to the fan base, or how is the fan base kind of taken to him at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think they like him. I think there's a little bit of hesitance because he did say this is going to be a launch, and it didn't necessarily happen. I mean, I think Nevada right now is a men's basketball town. I think you look at the history of success in men's basketball since 2000 compared to football, it's been much better. Football gets the resources. Football's getting a new $435 million arena for the 2027 season. So I think he's got to win over people by winning games. I think he's doing everything right, trying to get into the community. He is a great soundbite to me. He's the best soundbite in the Mountain West, one of the best in the nation. He does not say things that are boring during press conferences. Maybe sometimes that gets him into a little bit of trouble, but he's going to voice his opinion, and I think he fits in with Nevada from a blue-collar standpoint. I mean, this is a guy who grew up in rural Idaho, St. Mary's. He played for Western Montana, which is a lower-level school. Unfortunately, his career was ended due to a knee injury and a car accident that almost killed him. But then spent almost a decade at the high school level coaching and as an athletic director. Took a GA job when he was almost 30 years old that was more or less unpaid, even though his wife had just had a kid. So he took a risk on himself, taking that GA job at Utah State, and was able to build himself up and work at places like Boise State and Washington and Florida and Texas, and had that first tenure as a head coach at Montana State where he was super successful and set the Bobcats on the course to where they are now. So I think fans believe that he'll get the program turned around, but I do think it's definitely like, you got to show us, just because the fan base has been beaten down so much by going 7-30 over the last 3 years that the proof has to be in the wins. It can't just be in the talk. And I think Jeff Choate is great at the talk, and I think eventually he's going to be great at the wins as well.
I do want to touch on a couple positions here. Brendan Lewis was a guy that was pretty darn productive at quarterback. Yeah. He's out at QB, just transferred to Memphis. And it was a competition between Chuba Purdy and A.J. Bianco this spring for the starting quarterback job. I believe, if I remember correctly, Choate said that Purdy is kind of expected to be the guy, the number one QB1 heading into fall camp. What's your read on Purdy, and what's your read on that, how that competition played out this spring?
Well, I mean, obviously it's a familiar last name. He is Brock's younger brother. Given name is Preston, but he goes by Chuba. So began his career at Florida State, 2 years there. Went to Nebraska, 2 years there. now in his second year in Nevada. He actually hit the portal after the season ended because the expectation was for Brendan Lewis to return. And Nevada did a great job with him last year. I mean, Brendan Lewis had 2 touchdown passes and 6 interceptions during his first year at Nevada under Ken Wilson. Last year, to me, he was one of the better quarterbacks in the Mountain West. He was all Mountain West honorable mention. The expectation was for him to return, but NIL money is hard to turn down. So he hit the portal. Chuba took his name out basically a day later, and kind of the assumption has been that he'll be the day one starter. Now, AJ Bianco's got some starting experience at Nevada, but Chuba Purdy's a very talented athlete. The big question with him is, can he stay healthy? And that's the reason why he didn't really challenge for the job last year. He had double groin surgery, which kind of kept him out in the spring of 24. And then in the fall of 24, he started with a shoulder injury that more or less kept him out for all of camp and then the first month of the season. Now, Nevada found ways to get him on the field. They played him at running back. They played him at wide receiver. They played him a little bit in terms of a quarterback. He did start a game at Hawaii when Brendan Lewis was down with an injury. So, he started 5 or 6 games in his college career, but he's never really been the guy, and he's never really been healthy. And, he said this spring that he was fully healthy for the first time since high school, that he really likes the offense. They want to run the ball in this offense, and I think that really suits Chuba Purdy. I mean, Brendan Lewis did lead Nevada in rushing yards last season. I think the question is, can he lead your team with his arm as well? But the biggest question is, can he stay healthy for 12 games, especially when you open the season at Penn State as a 43-point underdog? Like, can he get through that game healthy and establish himself as the week-in starter for this team? I think it's going to come down to that health, because I think there is a lot of talent there. I mean, he's a former 4-star quarterback. He's got experience, obviously the great bloodlines. And I do expect him to be the starter, although A.J. Bianco is a solid prospect as well.
Yeah, I do. Actually, I'll go into the offense a little bit too. Offensive coordinator Sonny Lubick, he left for Kansas to be, I believe, the co-OC and tight ends coach. And then David Gilbertson got the internal promotion after being the quarterbacks coach last year. I know Gilbertson was pretty involved in the offense last year because Sonny Lubick was, he was dealing with a lot of cancer treatment and all that too. Do you anticipate any major scheme changes this year, or what, wrinkles have you kind of noticed recently?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's going to be anything too crazy. So Coach Lubick, did a fantastic job, but like you said, he was still kind of battling the end of leukemia, which was a very unfortunate diagnosis. And Coach Gilbertson did do a lot of the day-to-day stuff when Coach Lubick was down. So, he already had a pretty big imprint on the offense. He was the quarterbacks coach last year, so he was working with those guys and did a really good job. I think one kind of the under-the-radar things that happened with Nevada staff this offseason is Jim Mastro returned as running backs coach. So Jim Mastro was at Nevada from 2000 to 2010. He helped invent the pistol offense with Chris Ault before the 2005 season. From 2010, after Nevada finished 11th in the nation, he went to UCLA and then a stint at Washington State and then a stint at Oregon, where David Gilbertson was actually like his right-hand man, as kind of a quality control coach. So they have a really great relationship. I think Jim Mastro is an excellent football coach, especially in the run game. And I think he's going to have a big impact in how Nevada approaches its rushing attack. I think it's going to be maybe a little bit more simplified offense. I think they want to be able to execute what they run really, really well. And they believe if they run it well, that it's going to be successful. I think David Gilbertson is not, I wouldn't say a risk, but he's never been a play caller before. He's never been an offensive coordinator. So there is a risk when you elevate somebody to that position, and they've never done it before. His dad was the former head coach at Idaho and Cal and Washington, so he comes from really good bloodlines as well. Coach Choate said when he promoted him that Coach Gilbertson probably could have been an OC earlier if he kind of traded on his name, but he didn't really do that. So I think there is a lot of enthusiasm for the offense. I think that is the more solidified part of the roster. You do have Chuba Purdy back. You do have Marcus Bellin back as your slot wide receiver. I think he could be all Mountain West. Jace Henry's back at tight end. He broke his foot in the 4th game last season, but he's a quality tight end. They did bring in Herschel Turner Jr. from Utah State. He played a lot as a true freshman. I think he could be Nevada's first 1,000-yard back since 2016. And then you've got a couple of returning starting offensive linemen. Andrew Madrigal is going to be a 4-year starter at center. So, they did lose Isaiah Worrell to Oregon. He was the starting left tackle and potentially a top 10 pick, according to some draft experts. So there's rebuilding to do, but there's also some pretty good pieces there. And I think there's some pretty good young players. And I think they did pretty well in the transfer portal. There's definitely a lot more certainty on offense than defense, where there are a ton of question marks.
I do want to remind all of our listeners, too, that initially I was hired into this job to write and not talk. I completely boxed that last question saying Sonny Lubick left for
Matt.
Kansas. Matt Lubick, he left for Kansas. Sonny Lubick legendary Colorado State coach, did not leave for Kansas last offseason. But you mentioned, I mean,
his son though. That's his son. You were close enough.
Close enough. Should be a little better. That would have got me a good correction in print for sure. But from what you saw this spring, I mean, you mentioned a couple guys there too. What is what do you think is kind of the offense's biggest strength at this point?
And that's a tough question because I don't think Nevada has a strength on paper. I mean, you just look at the roster and who's returning, and I think it's fair to question where is the strength. I think the skill position players can be good. If Purdy stays healthy, I think he could at least be an average Mountain West quarterback. I'm really big on Herschel Turner, and I think he's going to have a lot of success in the run game. I think Marcus Bellin is one of the better wide receivers in the conference. I think you could see him used a little bit more than just the slot. And I think Jace Henry's a very good tight end, 270 pounds. It's mostly going to be blocking, but he did catch a couple of touchdowns. He was at Dartmouth previously. I think he's going to be a quality tight end as well. I think a lot of the offense is going to come down to, can the young wide receiver step up? So Nate Burleson II, he is the son of Nate Burleson, who played at Nevada. He's on the CBS morning show for news, also on the CBS football morning show on Sundays. He didn't have a lot of recruitment, Nate II, but he's the fastest wide receiver on the team, and he's got a lot of potential. There's another local recruit, Marshawn Brown. I mean, he looked like an NFL wide receiver. He's 6'4". He's got ideal speed as well. He's entering his third year, as is Nate Burleson II. They need those two guys to step up. They have brought in some transfers to try and help out that group. I think the offensive line will be solid. I don't know that it's going to be great, given some of the losses that they had. Not only did Isaiah World leave, Tyson Ruffins, a starting guard, he left. He went to Cal. So that was a difficult loss. And then Josiah Timoteo left to go to Oregon State. All those guys had starting experience. So there's a little bit of a rebuild on the offensive line. They did bring in a lot of FCS transfers on the offensive line who have a lot of starting experience and a lot of size. So I do think the line will be good. I think the wide receivers are a question mark. I think the running game will be solid, though. And I just think it comes down to Chubba Purdy. Like, with that last name, there's going to be a lot of expectations. And, I mean, this might be funny, but Nevada does a charity softball game against local law enforcement at the AAA stadium here in Reno. And, like, just watching him play softball from an athleticism standpoint, like, Chubba Purdy is an elite athlete. That's why they put him in at wide receiver and running back last year and tried to get him 5 to 10 plays and gadget situations. I think he's going to do a ton of great things with his legs. It's just, can he manufacture the offense? Can he make plays on third down and in the red zone where Nevada was so good last year? I think those are the questions with him. And I think a lot of people are excited to see whether he can have a breakout season in his 6th year in college. It's going to take that for Nevada to be an upper echelon team in the Mountain West, or even just a bowl caliber team in the Mountain West, because there are a lot of question marks on the roster. If your quarterback plays at a high level, those question marks tend to go away.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned, I mean, we just went over basically the entire offense and the like too. And I agree with you. Herschel Turner is a guy that, the little that I was able to see out of him at Utah State last year, I really like the flashes there too. But defensively, I mean, you mentioned that's, if the offense is the more secure side of the ball, the defense isn't maybe quite that. You did lose a couple, pretty nice players, especially cornerback Michael Coates, who was phenomenal last year. Who are the guys you're kind of expecting to be major contributors on defense this season?
Yeah, and that's a major question mark because you only return one starter, and it's a former walk-on who's a nose guard and Thomas Whitty. So I think there's a lot of competition. I think Stone Combs at linebacker, Austin Harnato at linebacker. Stone Combs has been in the program for 4 years. Harnato was a walk-on at Washington who was on Nevada's team last season. The Wolfpack did lose its top 2 linebackers. Drew Watts went with Brendan Lewis to Memphis. He was kind of an all-Mountain West honorable mention, second-team caliber player the last couple of years for Nevada. I think the secondary is a huge question mark. I mean, they lose all 5 starters. Michael Coates Jr. was first-team All-Mountain West. He was the only All-Mountain West honoree for the Wolfpack last year. Chad Brown, another starting cornerback, he went to Purdue. Both those guys were actually junior college in their background, so they were seniors last year, but because of that Diego Pavia injunction, they got an additional year, and they upgraded to Power 5 money, or Power 4 money, I guess. So the secondary, they've brought in like 8 to 10 pretty good transfers in my mind. Mervyn Kenyon, the second, he's a safety from Sac State. I think he's going to be a high-quality player for them. They also lost Keaton Crawford from safety. He was a 7th-round draft pick by the Arizona Cardinals. So there were a lot of question marks about Nevada's secondary last year because they lost everybody, and they turned in an NFL player and 2 guys who upgraded to power conference schools in the offseason. So I think that staff did a tremendous job, and I think the talent level that they're they brought in is not too different than the year before. So while the secondary maybe has the biggest question marks in terms of who's going to win those jobs, I think that should end up being an okay group. There's a guy named Ed Rambo. He's from Bowling Green. A former New Mexico, A.J. Odoms, then went to UTEP. He's probably going to be a starting cornerback as well. They brought in Hayden McDonald. He's from Columbia. He was all FCS, all American last year. So I think they've got some options there. I think it's okay. Can you get a pass rush? They had 14 sacks last year in 13 games. Not a lot of interceptions, not a lot of forced fumbles. I think it took till like game 9 to get a forced fumble. So I think the havoc plays were missing last year. And a lot of that stems from, can you get a pass rush? And Nevada thought its strength last year was going to be that pass rush. They brought in Caden Johnson from Wisconsin. They brought in Henry Ikahihifo from Cal. And those guys were all right. Caden got hurt, and I think that hurt them. They weren't dominant pass rushers. And I don't see dominant pass rushers on this year's roster either. And I think that's the big question mark. They've kind of gone to like more of a year one under Jeff Choate. They brought in a lot of either former 4-star guys or guys coming from power conference schools who didn't play a lot. And really this year's recruiting class is more of the junior college guys, more of the FCS guys who have played a lot of football, kind of get away from maybe the hype and get more to the blue collar. Because you look at Nevada, it doesn't have marquee facilities. It doesn't have an indoor football practice facility, even though it gets 30 degrees and snowing here, 100 degrees in the summer. Wildfire smoke from California messes up practices as well. You don't want players coming to Nevada and saying, why don't we have this and that and this and that? Because there's a lot that they don't have. I think Jeff Choate went back to his roots and away from maybe the Texas background and trying to get guys who are going to be disciplined, follow the scheme, be happy to be at the FBS level and play to their potential. So they are trying to go more with like a defense by committee kind of approach, and we'll see if that works. I mean, eventually you need NFL talent if you want to win conference championships, but I think they're trying to set the culture with a little bit more blue-collar mentality than we saw last year.
Yeah, and, it's been said a lot by a lot of UNM fans and all that too, and some UNM media too, the idea that, Jason X trying to build an FCS all-star team. But I think that's probably just going to be the approach, for the Mountain West schools for the most part heading forward. Maybe not Boise so much, but I mean, do you think that is, kind of just, ripping through the FCS ranks and really hitting that hard and also picking up JUCO guys and all that too, instead of the the former 4-star, 3-star down transfer coming to you? Do you think that's an effective, roster building strategy for Nevada?
Yeah, and you got to know who you are. And I think that's what Jeff Choate said when I said, what was the biggest thing that you learned on your first year on the job? And he learned what Nevada is and what kind of player works at Nevada. And not every player works at every program because of how that program is built. And if you want to be frank about it, like nobody knows exactly NIL budgets, but my guess is Brendan Lewis left to go to Memphis for an NIL payment that is more than Nevada's entire roster. So are you going to be able to go into a transfer portal and go and get players who have great power conference or FBS starting experience? No, not at Nevada, not right now. I think that's ultimately the goal, but first you have to set the foundation of being able to win, to create that enthusiasm, to create that revenue that you can then share through the house settlement or get that NIL donation. And Nevada's just not there right now. So FCS All-Star, I'm not sure that that's the exact template that, any Mountain West school wants to use, but some programs are in that position where that's what they have to be right now. And that's Nevada. That's New Mexico. That's probably Wyoming. That's probably San Jose State. And you just have to develop that talent, and you're probably going to lose them. But I think Jeff Choate wants to do better with high school recruits. He didn't really have much of a high school class in his first year because he got the job so late. I think they might have a couple of impact high school players this year. Cameron Brown is an edge that they really like, who's going to probably play a lot. But yeah, I mean, you look at Nevada's history, Colin Kaepernick, Nate Burleson, Joel Batonio. I can name a bunch of players who had really great NFL careers who had maybe 1 or 2 scholarship offers coming out of high school. And that's what Nevada's always been when it's been successful. And that's probably what it's going to have to be under Jeff Choate if it's going to be successful as well. This is just not a program that's going to be able to go out there and draw the best of the best, either in the high school level or the transfer portal level. It's just they don't have the facilities. Now, there is an indoor facility that's probably going to be coming online within the next year and a half because they did get to tap into some student fees for about $20 million. But the stadium is not really at the Mountain West level. The budget's not really at the Mountain West level. Jeff Choate's the second lowest paid coach in the Mountain West. It's just a program where you got to do more with less. And Jeff Choate's done that in his past, and I think that's why he was hired for this position, is because he does have that ability.
If you had to pick a transfer either side of the ball that'll have the biggest impact this season at this point, who would you pick?
I would go with Herschel Turner. I know we've mentioned him a couple times, but his senior year in the Bay Area, he ran for more than 3,000 yards and 40 touchdowns against good competition. And he steps into the Mountain West, and he's averaging 5 yards per carry at Utah State. Nevada wants to run the ball 60% of the time. Nevada doesn't have a bell cow back. They brought in a couple of guys, and they did all right. Patrick Garwo last year from Boston College, but he has graduated. They brought in Savion Red from Texas. He has since transferred because the cultural fit wasn't great. I think he ended up going to Sac State. So that number one running back position is wide open. There are a couple of guys who might be able to challenge him. Caleb Ramsey is a former Butte College guy who they really like. But it's a wide open job, and I think he's going to go and take it. And Nevada used to be a running factory. I mean, under Chris Ault, that's what they did so well. They're the only program in FBS history to have 3,000-yard rushers in 1 year. That happened in 2009. They led the FBS in rushing in 2010 when they went 13-1. And they haven't had a 1,000-yard running back since 2016. And that's just not Nevada football. They need that bell cow back, and I think it's going to be Herschel Turner. If you look on the defensive side of the ball, I will go with Mervyn Kenyon. That's actually a guy who wanted to play at Nevada coming out of high school in the Bay Area. He was really good friends with Carson Strong, who was a two-time Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year with the Wolfpack in 2020 and 2021. He had to take this weird route. He went to City College of San Francisco, and then he went to Idaho, and then he went to Sac State, and now he's here at Nevada. I think he's going to be an impact defensive back this season.
I think Marcus Ballone kind of fits maybe a little bit of the mold of a similar question, but if you had to pick a returner that you think is, set for a true breakout year on either side of the ball, who would you kind of pick?
Yeah, I'll go with Marcus. That sounds good. So he grew up in Truckee, California, which actually plays high school football in the state of Nevada. Truckee football is a great program. It's got like 15 state titles in the last 30 years or something. But now a lot of those guys have gone to Nevada. So Marcus went to Southern Utah and then Santa Barbara Community College and then UTEP and then Nevada last year. And nobody really expected much. Actually, Jeff Choate was calling him Mason at the beginning of fall camp. Didn't even know his first name. But he starts game one, and he is just really good with the ball in his hands in space. He's really tough. He's not a big kid. Usually if I'm taller than you, you shouldn't be an FBS football player. I am taller than him. I think he's listed at 5'9". And he mentioned this during spring camp. The best game he had last season was the game against Hawaii when Chubba Purdy and A.J. Bianco kind of split the reps. So I think he's really excited about what he can do. He was pretty injured toward the end of last year, and that maybe tamped down his productivity. But if you told me he's going to catch 75 balls for 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns, I would take that. He's an elite kick and punt returner. I think he had 7 or 8 of those in his 1 year at Santa Barbara Community College for touchdowns. So I think he's really dangerous in the punt game as well. I think that is a very good pick to be a breakout player on the offensive side.
Mm-hmm. You got Nevada's got kind of I wouldn't say as rough of a schedule as it had last year, but some really tricky games in the non-conference at Penn State, at Western Kentucky. That certainly isn't easy. Western Kentucky's been really good the last few years. I guess just in short, on offense, on defense, what kind of needs to happen overall for Nevada to make a bowl game this season?
Yeah, you mentioned the schedule. I think you're hoping to come out 2-2 at a non-conference. I think Western Kentucky's tough, and obviously Penn State's probably a pretty major L. Your FCS game is against Sac State, and they've got a lot of momentum with former UNLV offensive coordinator Brendan Marion, who's put a lot of points on Nevada the last couple of years. And then you also have a game against Middle Tennessee. So if you can win those two, and then you look at conference, Nevada's got a fairly difficult schedule, but the tough games are at home. UNLV's at home, Boise State's at home. So I think with easier games on the road, Utah State and whatnot. So I think that's how you want it drawn up. And we'll see how it plays out. But what needs to happen is Nevada needs to be a ball control offense. They need to run the ball for 5 yards per carry. They need to run the ball 40 times per game. And they need to do better on defense in terms of having major plays that turn the tide. And I think that's what they lacked last year. They didn't make a lot of game-changing plays on defense. It was bend but don't break, and they did a pretty good job at not breaking, but they didn't go and win games on defense very often, and they need to be able to do that. They need to be able to execute better in the fourth quarter. They were leading SMU by 9 points with less than 10 minutes to play. Game in the last 5 to 10 minutes with really quality play, and they weren't able to do that. So I think that was a frustration point that they need to get better at. And just finding that winning DNA is going to be a big part of this season. And the major dumb penalties killed them in so many games last year. And I think that's a big reason why they did change kind of player they were going after. So playing smarter football when your margin of error is already pretty thin. And I think it's going to be pretty thin given where the roster is. I think it's going to be a big deal as well.
Yeah, and I'm pulling it up right now because New Mexico had a horrendous penalty year last year too. I'm pulling this up right now. San Diego State was last in the country in terms of penalties. New Mexico was second to last, and Nevada was a tick up, 127 out of 134. And I was looking at these freaking penalty numbers every single week to see where New Mexico is stacking up. And I remembered Nevada trending down, tough like that. But I hate to do this to you because a lot of times people ask me this time of year, what do you think, New Mexico's record will be? And I usually just kind of have to shrug and say, well, I think they'll be interesting because I just don't quite know yet. Do you have, though, a record prediction for Nevada this season?
Yeah, I'm going 6-6 overall, 4-4 in conference. The betting line win-loss total is 4.5 from Vegas, so that's a little bit over that. Last year it was 2.5. I said over, and they got to 3. I think they're going to do a pretty good job of trying to maximize their talent. I think there are question marks, like we've mentioned throughout this, and the defensive staff basically, they're all in new positions. It's the same group of guys. So that's a change. Obviously, new offensive coordinator, that's a change. They can't afford a lot of injuries because the roster is still pretty thin in areas. But getting to 6 wins, I think, would be a successful season, which is kind of sad. If it was the Chris Alt days and you went 6-6, it's a terrible season. But that's just not where Nevada is. Nevada's trying to get out of the basement. They're trying to show a competency level that they haven't really displayed in recent years. I think last year they were much more competent as a football program. They played really hard. They just weren't able to finish because they did a lot of silly or dumb things throughout the course of the game or even at the end of the game. I do think that they can get back to a bowl. So I think 6-6 is probably maybe a touch optimistic, but I think it's a realistic goal. And I think it's kind of a necessary goal. I think given where this program is, and Nevada and New Mexico were left behind in the Pac-12, so that's going to hurt your fan base. They're not going to be quite as engaged. Given how much interest there is in men's basketball, Nevada needs to do something in football to get people excited again. And they did this meeting with a lot of the boosters in town that I was invited to, and they want to invest $50 million into Nevada football over the next 10 years to try and at least get it to the Mountain West median and how you fund a program. And to be able to get the enthusiasm to be able to draw those donations, you got to go and put a product out there that people are proud of. And it's been a few years since that's happened here at Nevada and at Mackey Stadium. So I think that's why this is such an important season, is to at least get back to a bowl, show some progress, show some competency, show some reason to be enthusiastic about your football program.
Nevada comes to New Mexico on October 18th. Shockingly, the first time since 2016 they've been to Albuquerque, which kind of blew me away. Before that game, I might be talking with you a little bit more, Chris. But Chris, thank you so much for coming on today, man.
Hopefully no lightning delays. I was at that game in 2016. I think it
I've heard about that game a little bit, yeah.
I think it lasted 5.5 or 6 hours. It wasn't very close, and there were a lot of delays. So fingers crossed on the weather, but we'll know either the Lobos or the Wolfpack. One of the Wolves is going to win that one.
Indeed. Chris, thank you again, man. Appreciate you.
Yeah, no problem.